Welcome to Get Serious, jumping back into another review of my notes from the $100 million money model affiliate live event in Las Vegas with Alex Hormozi. Again, 11 straight hours with Alex just firing value away the entire day here. And like I mentioned on the previous podcast, I thought this might be, maybe a two-part pod, could turn into 5 or more here. I'm sure you all don't mind me sharing such critical takeaways from one of the best entrepreneurs alive with the proof to back it up. When you got a net worth of over $250 million before age 40 and set the world record for fastest selling nonfiction book launch ever, I think we should all take note of some of these various business strategies and tactics here. So if you hadn't caught the previous episodes, the first one was just like my overall impressions day after the event. That actually started to go semi-viral. I don't know what's the definition of viral here, but there was starting to get more views than typical for videos posted on YouTube here. So no surprise talking about Hormozi here, but he's obviously popular and I just want to share as much value related to that as possible. So we'll provide as much input as I can to kind of keep this ball moving forward and give you all what you want to hear. And on that previous episode as well, I just spent 20 minutes about going over the Hormozi 6 framework, about why you can't do more, and the key constraints preventing you from answering that question effectively. And I also just wrote about that on the Serious News newsletter that came out over the weekend. Already got a lot of great feedback about that as well here too. And it's going to be a multi-part newsletter to share all of the various takeaways. So with all that in mind, I'll jump back into more here. So, after that Hormozi 6 framework, the other kind of core initial teaching that Alex jumped into before he started diving into individual businesses and fireside chats with, some of the top affiliates was just focused on answering the question why employees don't complete work assigned to them. So he's talked about this framework a couple times in different scenarios here, but it comes up often enough that, again, Alex finds, this would be useful enough for everybody here to reiterate again, because it's just, I think any of us who run a business, whether you have, just yourself, frankly, you can consider yourself both an owner and an employee sometimes, depending on what hat you're wearing. Why aren't you completing the work at hand? Or if you just have, maybe a VA or two, or maybe you have a full-on team, inevitably as a business owner, you're going to be working with other people that need to deliver a product or services. So it applies to effectively everybody, again, even if it's just yourself. So again, I love how Hormozi just there's no feeling about, I feel like this is the problem, or I think this is kind of where it's going. It's just okay, how do we boil this down to as much of, first principles thinking in related, in as much as it relates to, the actual core constraints on why something isn't happening, or what is blocking an action from occurring, or even, a line of thinking to, actually come to fruition for real action. So in this case, there's really 5 core routes why employees don't complete their work. One is that they didn't know that is what you wanted them to get done. So all of this, why employees don't complete work, it all comes down to communication ultimately. No surprise, we're human beings, right? But sometimes the core constraint is okay, you imagine this task was supposed to be done, but your employee or whoever's working with you, contractor, what have you, that was not properly conveyed, or there was just some game of telephone in between, and just that process and communication needed to be reiterated further. So they didn't know that you wanted to get that done. Let's just take this example. Hey, I want this podcast published by 3 p.m. Central today. Maybe that wasn't conveyed over as clearly. You could have just said, hey, I want this these pods published. I don't know if that example is applying quite as much, but I think you get the idea here of they were confused about that this was the specific task that you wanted done. So just take that in mind here. The next question is, how? The employee or the contractor, even yourself again too, like consider yourself as an employee. When you wear that hat, like you didn't know how to get that done, or your employee didn't. So, again, let's go back to the podcast publishing example. Maybe they don't know how to do that. Like it was never explained to them. It was never, they never had a loom, anything like that. And so you might assign something, but there's a misunderstanding on how that is actually supposed to be done, or maybe they don't even know how to access the training to learn how to do that in the first place. So that's another example on why things don't get done. And then another issue is they didn't know when that work was supposed to be completed. Again, going back to the podcast publish example, I say 3 p.m. Central, like that makes it more clear that should get done by this exact time. But if I was just telling you, publish the podcast, like the employee might assign a different timestamp on when that task is supposed to be completed. So there might be a misunderstanding on the actual timeline and priority of getting something done. And then the other piece is just a flat out block. If you ask your employee to, let's keep with the same example, right? Like the podcast published, but let's say, like there was that AWS error that was affecting a ton of websites recently. Like, let's just say the podcast platform was just down from the AWS error, or some other error, or maybe the internet just went out. Wherever your employee is, like they are effectively blocked from completing that task. So that can be another key piece for why something actually can't get done. And then finally, in the middle of all of these is just, want, that the employee is just, they're burnt out, or they just don't, see the need to actually get something done. This one's definitely more, psychological in nature here. And, generally we can assume that if we're bringing on the right talent and we have a culture of, getting things done, and most people want to feel productive and valued. So, and that's something Alex was routinely saying, is like, most people want to do a good job. They want to be rewarded for, doing what they were assigned, and, what they feel is bringing value to the company. So, it's more rare that you're going to find kind of a lack of motivation. And usually if you solve one of those other pieces, like there could be confusion on like what, or, that you were asking something, that specific item, how to do it, when to do it, or if they're blocked, like those items could be affecting them psychologically. And then all of a sudden that creates the burnout or the lack of desire to move forward, because it's like too frazzled, or maybe you have so many competing priorities for them to get done that it's just like overwhelming, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't even want to be doing any of this because it seems like a complete mess. So that's just a really helpful framework that I'm also trying to keep in mind here. And the thing is too, is like, as we all get better at AI prompting, or hopefully you're getting that on a daily basis too, is like, this is how you talk to AIs as well too. And I think the best prompting that you can do with AIs is also the best way to communicate to other human beings, because again, when you communicate to AIs, like you need to solve all of those items in relation to a specific task that you're asking them, and so that again kind of directly applies to what you can get when you actually communicate with your own internal talent, or external as well too. So that was the other item. Now I will shift more into kind of key takeaways for the fireside chats. Again, props to the top 10 affiliates who each got 30 minutes with Alex one-on-one to just get direct answers about their business, while the rest of us could listen in. And then those top 10 also got a private dinner with Alex and Layla after that live event. So, again, crazy bonus. Props to those guys. I was definitely jealous of the opportunity when I was there, but it's like, okay, well, I didn't put the work in to get in the top 10. These folks did. So, they obviously are reaping the rewards. So nothing to complain about. And, one guy was actually in the real estate space. So he was going first, more related to kind of broker recruitment, real estate agent recruitment in Southern California. He was just running into, going back to that Mosey 6 constraint pathway, he was running more into just a manpower issue of like, yeah, I'm getting, starting to run some more ads. I'm starting to get, some real leads coming in here, but it's like he's just the core person to be addressing like pretty much all the inbound coming in. And it's like, the kind of battle between when you start hiring talent, you also have to potentially give up some profits that can be coming in, and when is a good time to actually solve that core constraint here. And one thing, and I'm the victim of this too. I think most entrepreneurs are. So we can get so tied up into these numbers here, especially like the round numbers. It's like okay, you have this, initially like a 6-figure milestone, and you get to like 100K, whatever. Then pretty soon it's like, yeah, I'm gonna get to $1 million business, and it's almost right away after that. Maybe it's like, yeah, I get to like 5 million, and then it gets 10 million, and you kind of keep expanding beyond that, and you kind of set these external frameworks to honestly kind of like these arbitrary numbers, the power of 10 numbers that, define so much of our life just because they're an easy mental model to kind of keep in mind. But it's like, what do they actually mean inherently? Like, what's the difference between an $8 million business and a $10 million one? Or why does it feel so much more successful to get to that $10 million number versus like just shy of that? So like we really have to examine, our relationship with these external outputs. Like, this entrepreneur who is doing this real estate agent kind of recruiting service, he's like, yeah, I need to hit 2 million ARR like ASAP here. And I know, and I can do that. Like, I'll just be feeling better about the business. And Alex really just asked him to take a step back. And he's like, it's again, like all entrepreneurs, like we tend to get tied into these numbers, but what ultimately tends to be a more valuable outlook is just to focus more on the internal deliveries. Like, just if you get so tied up in these numbers, it's like, yeah, you might risk making kind of poor decisions just to hit these external targets that you might not fully conceptualize from what you need to do to actually get there. So to be, even more concise about that is like, okay, if I'm going to focus on those internal deliveries, what Hormozi tries to do is instead, okay, like to get these numbers, what are those exact actions that I'm taking that will lead to that inevitably? So he's like, okay, instead of, oh, I'm going to build a $2 million revenue business, it's like, can I write 1,000 emails instead? And understanding my metrics from writing those emails, like that will certainly lead me to, in his case, like, yeah, that's going to lead to a $100 million business. Or like, let's say earlier on, that'll lead to a $2 million business because, X amount of emails leads to X amount of dollars coming in from leads and then eventual conversions and delivery of your product. So it just breaks it down more where, again, we're humans, we're born to compare ourselves to each other, and our past self and current self, really our future self as well too. You can't really compare to current self here, but past and future, and just like put so much pressure on these just external metrics that kind of mean different things to pretty much everybody, and assign so much value to them, but like we don't spend enough time thinking about what those actions are that actually lead to those results, because that's just, it's a bit more boring, right? Like no one wants to, it's not sexy to think about, yeah, I just, I wrote 1,000 emails to get to, being a $5 million business. Just like, no, I want that gratification of saying that, hey, I built a $5 million business, both to, stroke your own ego as well as demonstrate to others. I thought that was a really helpful framework to keep in mind, because like, yeah, I'm such a numbers guy too, and it's like, yeah, we keep getting bigger, and it's like, yeah, $10 million a year, and then there's a route to 100, and I have this goal to be $1 billion plus AUM, assets under management business, and it's like, yeah, it's fun because I'm ambitious and so forth, but it's also like, again, you're just attributing some external validation from, again, frankly, just these random numbers out there. I try to keep that in mind as well too, because that's something I really struggle with. Lastly here, again, there's only well, there was 10 fireside chats. Not all of them. I took, some were more relevant than others. Um, but yeah, I'm only going to wrap up takeaways from this first fireside chat, and then end this other podcast. So again, there's just a lot of excellent content. Again, I've never taken this many notes at an event as I did for this Hormozi thing. So again, appreciate you all being along for the journey, and I think it's all going to be extremely helpful for your own business, or at least a few nuggets to take you forward. And so to wrap this one up, this entrepreneur where he was just like, oh yeah, the leads are coming in, Facebook ads, he's getting solid metrics, seemingly good, CAC to LTV ratios. Or LTV to CAC ratio, rather, vice versa. But yeah, just being able to deliver on that, it's going to be stressful. It's like, yeah, when do I hire? And in this case, like Alex is like, inevitably we're going to be facing some of these core constraints within a business where you have to make certain trade-offs. And like it might be short-term in one direction for a while, but inevitably for the growth of the business, like you have to decide which part of the business you're going to sacrifice more on. Like no one runs just a perfect operation where every single part of the business is just firing on all cylinders at all times. Like it's unrealistic. So, but so much of us get stuck in uncertainty that, to let anything start to falter. And so in this case, when it came time to, potentially have a supply side constraint, where this entrepreneur was expanding his business, Alex was like, yeah, you can either trade profits or reputation in the short term. Like one of those has to be traded for. Very hard choice, right? But like what are you going to do? Like ultimately only you can decide on which path is appropriate here. So for instance, like, yeah, if he's just building in more leads, like running more ads, bringing in more demand, but he doesn't really want to bring other people on. Like he could bump profits up within the company, like more take-home pay potentially for the company there. But his ability to deliver is inevitably going to be hurt. That is going to hurt reputation a bit. Like again, even if you were just near perfect at delivering, or like when phone, your phone is ringing, like you're answering within the first minute, even if you're just delayed enough to like be answering or returning calls within 10 minutes, that is going to hurt your reputation a bit more compared to if you're answering every single call from when it's being dialed within a minute or returning calls within a minute of receiving them. So like that's an inevitable bottleneck for increased demand, is if, you don't bump your operations, you can bump more profits, but your reputation is going to be hurt. On the flip side, if you're willing to sacrifice profits in the short term to understand that you're going to be bumping demand, but you're building out your ops, so, hiring more folks, or maybe successfully implementing AI to allow you to service more demand without sacrificing your ability to service, then you're going to be sacrificing profits in the short term because you have to further reinvest into your business operations, but you can maintain your reputation throughout that because your ability to deliver won't fall off there. Notably on both of those sides, it should just be a short-term hit there too, because like if you bumped up profits a bit first, like you could then reinvest further into the operations thereafter, like give yourself a bit more cushion, and then you can repair your reputation afterward. Or again, like you could bump your operations first, maintain the reputation, and then you'll still be earning more cumulative profits to eventually earn that win fill over a longer period of time and kind of compound your results that way. So it's again kind of the short-term trade-off on what to make there, depending on who you are as an entrepreneur and what you feel is best for your business. So I thought that was another really helpful framework. It's like, sometimes you just got to make the tough calls, and which constraint are you going to solve for first, or in what way, in order to still move the ball forward. So really like that one as well. Again, we're at the 22-minute mark here. I will pause on this one so we can jump into the next next set of notes here. I'm really enjoying this though. Like this is food for thought for myself here, because it's just, helps me reflect and, learn these lessons again, by teaching them all to you. So, selfishly, this is only helping me move the ball forward too. Hopefully you're getting stuff out of it. SeriousLand.capital for any of your funding needs, $50K minimum purchase price, Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, and a Serious News newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to that yet, it's probably the content that we get the most replies to and feedback on. So hopefully you're getting that. It's free. Sign up if you haven't already on seriousland.capital. Take care, everybody. Subscribe and share. Goodbye.